Welcome to our March Town Hall. Today we are going to just introduce the team to you, have a mission moment, which is kind of why we do what we do here, talk about our volunteers and give them a little recognition, and then listen to Alexi. Uh, Also, you can see here our upcoming town halls are April 23rd and May 20. I also want to give a mention, just a reminder that May 1st is our Endeavor Awards. If you have not been to one, it is really fantastic. If you have been to one, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. May 1st, David is going to drop the link in there. We have a 50% off discount for our volunteers. He'll drop the link and the code in. We would love to see you there. This is the mission operations team. So you see Alejandro, who is our operations manager. Maddie is our senior mission operations coordinator. Rochelle and Logan are mission operations coordinators, and David and Ashton are our volunteer services coordinators. Those are the two that you come to if you have any questions about your volunteer status, about getting into VPOIDs, any of those things. The rest of the team is who you go to if you are talking about a mission. Mission moment. So I want to talk to you just a bit about why we do what we do. So we received this card in the mail from Sandra, one of our patients. You see the front of the card there over under Grateful Hearts and with those adorable pictures. I'd like to read to you what Sandra said. She says, "This year has reshaped me in ways I'm still understanding. When I look back on this season, what I see most clearly isn't the hardship, it's the people and the organizations who showed up in extraordinary ways. Angel Flight was such a highlight and gift. The gift of transportation lifted a tremendous burden during an already overwhelming time and allowed me to focus more fully on my healing. Being chosen for Flights of Joy was another incredible blessing that brought such relief to me and such joy to my daughters. We love watching the Olympics on the projector, and my girls are in the spring show for ice skating. I am deeply grateful for the kindness, generosity, and compassion that carries us all through. Thank you, Sandra, Attica, and Neely." And on the right side there, you see a little picture of the Flights of Joy that happened last December when this family was receiving their gifts. So just a reminder that stories like this one and gratitude like that is why we continue to do this wonderful mission. Now I'd like to introduce Ashton Thorne, who is going to talk a little bit about volunteer recognition.
Thank you, Sherry. Hello, everybody. First, just want to thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us for this town hall. We're super excited to have Alexi here to speak to everybody. He's a wealth of knowledge. And so here we'll take a look at pilots who flew their first mission since the last town hall. So lots of names in there. Shout out to those folks. And then next slide, please. And then here are our Earth Angels who have driven since the last town hall. So you could take a look at all of those Earth Angels that are doing a great job jumping in and driving our passengers. And now I'll go ahead and pass it to David to continue some additional volunteer recognition.
Yeah, thanks, Ashton, and thanks everyone for joining us here today. It's really exciting to see all those first missions, and we are also want to recognize some of the major milestones our volunteers have reached this year. So it all starts with that first mission. So we're really excited to see all the names here on the list. Special recognition goes out to Carrie Riley and Blaine Ney, both flying 100 missions. And a big special shout out to Ace flying 400 missions. You can see the special cookies we had made for him there. So big shout out, congrats, thanks to all of our volunteers. And with that, I'll pass it back to Sherry.
And at this time, I'm going to introduce Alexi, who is going to talk to you about safety. Alexi, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. And also, congratulations to the initial volunteers, the seasoned volunteers, and also to all the staff for doing this incredible work. It's wonderful work. We will talk today about the article that was written a couple of months ago about fatigue and the duty day, if you will, and the long day and the multi-leg trap and threat. Which is an issue for angel flights and for any kind of flying for that matter. Jess, when she put out the reminder for the forum, asked that we all contribute, and I would like to ask those of you that wish to do so to please do so. This is not a very esoteric subject like some of the others maybe have been before. So you all have experience with this. A lot of you, a lot more than I do. In flying multi-legs for angel flight. So I'd like to hear your methods of mitigating the threat of fatigue and multi-leg days and so forth. I do have a lot of experience with multi-legs. I'll date myself a little bit for those of you that remember the shuttle by United operation from the mid 90s to the mid 2000s. It's before regional jets were in the picture. So we, with 737s, flew whatever the regional jets are flying today. So we would, for 10 years, I did that operation, and we flew, this is no exaggeration, about 100 legs per month. So that was, I do have familiarity with that. I also have familiarity with operating on the backside of the clock and using caffeine for that, to mitigate that threat. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. But genuinely, I do want to hear your input. So don't be bashful. At the end, ask your questions, but also share your methods of how you mitigate this threat. Speaking of threats, and I will always use this umbrella method, if you will, of the threat and error management for discussing. Thank you, Jess. Excellent cue. That was brilliant. So this is something we've talked about before. By the way, on the article, I have a hyperlink there that goes back to talking about this in great detail. So I'll just touch upon it here shortly, just a little bit briefly, so that you can understand what we're talking about. If you recall, in the very first article that I wrote years ago, I talked about how we want to live in safe operations. That's where we want to exist. Now, there is no flight that ever operates without threats. It's impossible, right? Anything that we do in life has threats, but especially flying has threats. Some days more than others, but we need to prepare for those threats. And we'll briefly talk about that through this session today relating to fatigue, so that if we prepare for those threats, we can return back into safe operations. We're going to use our single resource management or multi-crew resource management techniques and our threat and error management techniques to get back into safe operations. If you can see the upside down pyramid, if we don't really prepare for those threats, they may lead to errors, right? And so if we do perform and conduct errors, then we will need to repair those errors, again with those skill sets of threat and error management, being communication, workload management, automation management, energy management, whatever the case might be. These are all the tools that will return us back into safe operations. If we don't repair those errors, we may lead into UAS, which is undesired aircraft state. And then we need to recover from those UASs with those tools to get back into safe operations. If we don't recover from a UAS, we may have an incident or an accident. So that's the Swiss cheese, if you will, process of getting into an incident or accident. There's a lot of opportunity and before that were to happen in order for us to get back into safe operations. Thank you for that, Jess. And we can go back to that. Appreciate it. The other subject that is applicable to today is something I've talked about before, which is the decision of assure loss. And humor me here while I use this little fella. And again, I have a hyperlink in the article discussing that. I'll be very quick with this as well. It's game show theory, basically. And whenever we have a decision, we have option A and option B. Option A is the decision of a sure loss. Option B has two potential outcomes. One is failure, one is success. So what we need to do is, when we're about to make this decision, we need to project ourselves forward to the failure. And if that's something we can live with, then we may take this option. If it's absolutely something we cannot live with, then we must take the decision of a sure loss. What's the sure loss, you say? Well, again, it goes back to game show theory. Let's make a deal. I think it was the game. Basically, here's $100 or take what's behind the curtain, right? $100 is the decision of a sure loss. Behind the curtain, we have two options. One is failure. We'll get a bag of rocks behind the curtain, or we'll get a bag of money, right? So that's, if we're over here and we decide, well, can I live with a bag of rocks? Well, I didn't have anything before. Well, then sure. So then I end up doing this, which is typically what casinos do, and that's how they win, right? So that's the human condition. Because the human condition is we don't like to make the decision of a sure loss. That is not something we as human beings tend to do. I'll bring that up as an example quite a bit on how fatigue and multi-legs gets this to be applicable. So I'll move this back. Again, I do have some hyperlinks in the article for both the threat and error management and the decision of a sure loss. We talk about fatigue and multi-leg mission creep, and I call it a creep because it's very subtle. It does tend to creep up. So we'll discuss that. And we have had incidents, by the way, even at Angel Flight West, that can be attributed to fatigue and multi-legs. We've also had folks, I've had to debrief a few individuals that are extremely well intended, right? But yet they performed so many missions so frequently and with such disregard, if you will, to just the human condition of fatigue and so forth, that it did affect their performance. And it's subtle. And again, the intentions are always good. So it's something that we need to be aware of and need to manage as a threat. Why can philanthropic flying be especially challenging? Well, it's what I call, at first, a mission might look good on paper. It might look like it's one leg, let's say from Fortuna to Sacramento. There's a leg that comes in mind that I've seen before. The weather might be good. We're familiar with the airports. We're familiar with the airplane. What we're not realizing, though, is the potential that's out there. And I'll discuss that in more detail. We have the threat of early departures. I know you've all endured that. I remember a young gentleman that I had to take from San Jose Airport to Santa Monica, which is about a 2-hour flight. And they needed to be in Santa Monica before 8:30 in the morning. I'm about 45 minutes away from San Jose because of the traffic. So you can see, if you backtrack the time, it's getting to be pretty early. So again, threats, and to each individual, early means something different, right? If you're a really morning person, that's great. If you're not, that's super early. So one needs to manage that and be aware of it. Long cross-country legs that require sustained attention. And there's something else I want to bring up. The environment in an airplane, and especially a single-engine piston or a multi-engine piston, is quite fatiguing. And we don't realize that necessarily. It's very noisy. Even with noise-canceling headsets, your body feels the noise. And it's constantly vibrating, constantly. And you also can't move for the most part, right? You can't get up and stretch. You can't walk around. It's very tiring on the body. So that no matter how in shape you are, no matter how well you've eaten and so forth, it is very challenging, much more so than just even being in a car. The emotional load. We have the load of being empathetic. I think that's a common trend of all Angel Flight volunteers, right? Everybody's empathetic. That's why they're performing this mission. So it's also creates a load when we are in the presence of someone who's going through some very difficult times, and we feel like we need to complete this mission, right? That's the other thing we want to do. Bruce Fulton, the other safety officer, wrote a very nice article a few months ago about how maybe we shouldn't classify some of those as missions in our head, at least, right? Because if we call it a mission, then we must complete it. Something to be aware of, right? The little trap that might lead us into performing something that we maybe shouldn't be doing because it's called a mission. Again, unfamiliar airports, airspace, terrain, places we haven't been before. One way to mitigate that is potentially do what I call a self-route qualification, right? In the commercial operations, a lot of times when you fly into challenging or unfamiliar airports, you need to perform a route qualification with someone, either an instructor or someone who's been there. Maybe do that yourself. I've done that before. I go to an airport and I see an airport on the schedule that I've never been to before. I might go fly it on my own just to see what it's like before I go take a passenger on Angel Flight and deal with. And I always learn something 100% of the time. I go, oh, that would have been a little bit tricky if I had to do that with a passenger on board. So that's a technique about mitigating that threat. And fatigue is not, just as a reminder, fatigue is not just about being sleepy, right? It's about cognitive degradation. And that is so, so subtle. And a lot of times not easily recognizable by ourselves, by us. So we're going to talk about some of those traps. Now, how does it manifest itself? How does it show itself in the flight deck? Well, again, that varies. I will tell you this, for me, having done countless backside of the clock flights, I know when I'm repetitively yawning, and I know that sounds normal, but I know when and I'm like, uh-oh, here it is. I am fatigued, right? I'm not talking about one yawn every now and then. I'm talking about those big yawns that are just very uncontrollable, if you will, right? The other thing I notice is when I tend to repeat a checklist, or when I'm slow doing mental math, that's an indication of fatigue setting in. And when we are over reliant to automation, which is an interesting subject, because I also view automation as a great tool. So don't ever think, oh, I'm not going to rely on automation. It's a touchy subject, because I absolutely rely on automation. I think it's very important, and I think for the folks that say that, oh, well, that's not a real pilot, if you will, that's a poor way to categorize this. It's most definitely, especially for single pilot operations in IFR, it is essential. So if you have it, use it. The thing is, are you telling yourself, well, I will only fly this flight simply because I have an autopilot? That might be something that might make you question whether or not you should continue. So that's just something, pose that question to yourself before that. Now, irritability, of course, with either passengers or people, or even situations that are going in a non-normal way, right? I know that's, for me, that's usually an indicator. When I sense that my patience level is way down with something that didn't quite go the way I wanted it to go, that makes me question myself as to if I am fully cognitively 100% as I should be, right? Now, again, it's a touchy subject. Will you really be 100% all the time? That's a lofty goal, I think. So that's a very high expectation, not necessarily a requirement, but it's just a red flag, just something to look at. A reminder that a fatigued pilot might look fine and might perform fine until a non-normal situation occurs. That's where the challenge is, right? That's why we have backups to backups to backups in commercial aviation, and that's when we don't have them, bad things happen. Unfortunately, a very case in point in that is in the recent accident in LaGuardia, right, where it's great. Like, I'll give you an example, a little bit off the mark here, but again, it highlights how when things are fine, then it's not a problem to have short staffing or having things operating on the backside of the clock, whatever the case might be. I was in Honolulu departing on a red eye, and I talked to the same controller for the clearance, ground, tower, and departure. The same individual. So she gave me my altitude, she gave me my push clearance, she gave me my takeoff clearance, and then gave me my initial vector all the way to high altitude, to flight level 230. And I thought, well, that's great until something goes wrong. What if I had an engine failure and all of a sudden I needed to return and what have you? So if a person is bored on the side, an additional controller, if you will, then that is because they're bored 99% of the time. They're needed at that 1% of the time. So that's why, in the same approach to how we mitigate these fatigue and long days, we're gonna discuss some rules we might consider implementing on ourselves that are really applicable and really will come to shine when things don't go well. That's the idea. And that's the challenging part of selling safety, if you will. In all my years of doing safety commercially, I will tell you that the hardest thing to sell has been preventative safety. Is sell something before it has happened. That is very difficult to convince folks that are responsible for implementing rules to be convinced to do. In this case, we're on our own. So it's what we convince ourselves to do. So there is the challenge. So speaking of that, a little segue. self-imposed duty rigs on ourselves and borrowing from the airlines and borrowing from commercial operators. For those of you that fly professionally on the side as well, you know that, or have done so in the past, you know that those regulations are extremely complicated, and they've become even more complicated in the last 10 years with the with FAR 117. They are so complicated that we have computer programs that analyze, how many crew you have, what time of day it is, where you're going, what time are you leaving, etc. It involves crew scheduling, dispatch, and so forth. It's a very complicated process. But the good thing about it is it sets a boundary, and it's insurmountable. Once you hit that boundary, you've turned into a pumpkin. That's it. You're done. You've got to, you can't fly. And it's an easy, it's in a way, it's an easy way to make yourself accountable. In FAR Part 91, aviation, like we do in Angel Fly West and other philanthropic organizations, we don't have any of that, right? We can fly until the cows come home. We can fly all day long. There's the only rule we might come up against is the careless and reckless, but even that one, it's subjective. So I think it's important that if we have commercial operators that are imposing and mandating specific fatigue rules and trip rules and so forth, we should probably do something similar. That's my recommendation. Now, what we do is subject for discussion, and also it's personal, and it's a function of where you're going sometimes. But we should have some general rules that we can fall back on in case when we reach the point of recognizing that we might be fatigued. So I talk about some of those here. Maximum duty day of 8 to 10 hours. And what am I talking about duty day? That's something for those of you that haven't experienced commercial operations before. It's kind of a subtle term. Well, what does that mean? Well, I know for me, it means the time I leave the house to get to the hangar, and then I open stuff up and I start the pre-flight and I file my flight plan. I'm on duty, right? But the Hobbs meter hasn't moved. I don't have any flight time yet. That's my duty time. So that's a solid 30 to 45 minutes before takeoff, even just getting to the airplane, performing the pre-flight and the walk around and so forth. I might have to fuel the airplane. That's still duty. I get to somewhere, I pick up a passenger. The time that I'm there, I'm still on duty. I fly them to somewhere, and then maybe I'm going to sit and wait for them for 4 or 5 hours, right? That's pretty common. That time, I'm on duty. I'm not getting, I'm not flying. My Hobbs meter is not moving, but I'm still on duty. So if you add all those hours, you might be surprised how long you've been on duty, right? I know that flight that I was looking at from Fortuna to Sacramento, to SAC Executive, it takes me an hour and a half to get to Fortuna, pick up a passenger, get to Sacramento. That's another hour and a half. Then probably sit there for 4 or 5 hours, then another hour and a half to get him back to Fortuna, and then another hour and a half for me to get back home. That's not, flight time alone might be maybe 6 hours, but duty time is probably close to 14, right? So that's something that, again, looks good on paper and easy on paper. But if you actually sit down and do all the numbers ahead of time, you might see that it's not doable. And we'll talk about some ways to mitigate. And then, so that's duty time. And then we also have flight time. We might want to give ourselves a limitation of, let's say, 6 hours of flight time total in a 24-hour period or in a day. We can talk about mandatory breaks, maybe 60 minutes between each flight, 45 minutes to get around, to move, to get the blood flowing, right? Use the facilities, eat something, drink something. We don't have the luxury of having lavatories in most of our airplanes. So that's, again, obviously something very common sense to consider. Consider maybe the last leg not being night or being heavy IMC, or maybe being into an unfamiliar airport. Those are things that contribute to stress and therefore contribute to fatigue. And they always seem to happen at the end of the day. And it's easy to look at it when you're rested and you're starting the trip versus projecting yourself forward to what we talked about earlier about the decision of a sure loss, and go, what's that failure going to look like? So maybe my decision of a sure loss, which is what I did with this young man out of San Jose, was for me to go the day before. I went to San Jose the day before in the afternoon while it was still daytime. I landed in the daytime, parked myself in an FBO, and went and got a hotel room. And then I was able to just take an Uber in the morning and pick him up at 6 a.m. to fly him out of San Jose to Santa Monica. It's a decision of a sure loss because it cost me an extra day, right? That's But at the end of the day, I'm looking at my duty dame because I waited for him in Santa Monica to bring him up back home again. It would have been a very long day, which would have had a potential threat for the return leg, even the non-Angel Flight West leg, if you will, the leg from San Jose back home for me to ferry my airplane back to my house. Or maybe I would have decided that, when I get back to San Jose, I'll spend the night down there and I won't go home. Something to that effect. Again, we need to think about those things beforehand so that we can mitigate the threat while we're in the midst of fatigue and therefore not able to recognize that we are under the influence of fatigue. It's no different than when we prepare. Remember, that's what we talked about in the threat neuromanagement. We prepare for the threats, just like we prepare for a rejected takeoff by doing a very thorough briefing as to what we will reject for, so that we don't make that decision of, should I reject for this while we're smoking along down the runway, right? We make that decision beforehand. That's what we refer to as preparing, so that in the midst of the non-normal, we can actually regress back to our preparation. This is no different. We once we have these boundaries, if you will, right, they are a foundation for mitigating this threat. When we say, okay, 8 to 10 hours of duty day, we create a decision framework before fatigue sets in. If we think we're going to be able to clearly make those decisions while we are fatigued, that's a mistake, right? That's not going to lead to the best results. That's why we need to, in my opinion, place those self-imposed rules so that we don't have to deal with that at the moment. And I'm open to what works for you. Here's another thing that I wrote here. If this were the first flight of the day with multiple legs to follow, would I still go? If you're at the end, right? If you're on leg 4, coming back home. And if I had more legs to go, or am I just doing this because it's the last leg? Just something to consider. Okay. Caffeine. Love it. I can't live without it. I'd have a big headache if I didn't take it, but it is a tool, not a solution. And I will say this unequivocally, and there's probably some of you out there that are physicians, nutritionists, that know this subject much better than me. However, I will tell you that there is, with absolute certainty, there is, just from the fatigue management stuff that I've done through the years, there is zero substitute for fatigue. Then the only solution is rest and sleep. That's it. The caffeine, all it does is it potentially temporarily increases alertness, but it most certainly does not improve cognitive performance, right? And it's no substitute for rest or sleep. There is no other substitute besides sleeping or resting. And it might temporarily increase alertness, but it will not improve decision making. It just won't, right? If fatigue is in there, it's the underlying threat. So again, important that you know best how that works for you. Some of you might not use caffeine at all. You have my admiration, and that's great, because that means you're able to
Yeah.
you're able to perform without that influence, if you will.
I don't know
But
if you weigh
it's something to be aware of. I
why,
think
but almost 98 pounds.
someone unmuted. There we go. Okay. So consider that if you're using caffeine to push through a leg, consider whether or not you should be doing that, right? When I talked about turning down, and so let's talk about now turning down a mission. And I actually would solicit at the end the input from all the volunteer folks, Sherry and the whole team, as to what's the best way for all of you all to handle a potential cancellation because of fatigue. And I'll give you my suggestions as well. So again, I'm soliciting input from all of you regarding this subject. But for example, for me, when I was discussing this scenario of going to Fortuna, Sacramento, back to Fortuna and back, right? I actually usually tell myself, no, I am not going to plan to wait for you to take you back home. That's too long of a duty day for me. And therefore, when I get to Sacramento, I'm going to go home, and I needed someone else to do the other flight. or I might suggest other things like, hey, maybe I'll spend the night there. Maybe I can take you home tomorrow, and maybe we can provide accommodations for the individual, right? Maybe again, a little bit of a decision of a sure loss, right? It's not probably what they want. They want to be home that night. It might not be what you want. I want to help this person, and I want to be able to do what looks good on paper and just wait for them and bring them back. But again, that's where we are relying on all of us as command pilots and making sure we make these decisions based on the threat and error management model by thinking ahead and making that decision ahead of time, not while we're in the midst of the emotional load of looking at the puppy eyes of this individual, right, that wants to get back, or while we are under the influence of the empathy that we want to bring this person back, right? These are all just constant factors that influence our decision. It's important that we are stern with this ahead of time in the interest of safety. Now, if a decision is made to cancel, let's say, right, or to either cancel or not perform the flight, I will say this, that I say it on every briefing, and I say it on every new pilot that I debrief or brief, or a new person that we talk to, and I know the entire team here will completely back me up on this. The Angel Flight organization, West organization, is never ever going to doubt your decision ever, or question or doubt it or second guess it ever, like ever, right? That is the beauty of this. And I'll tell you, having operated commercially, what I am encountering here is far superior in that arena than anything else I've ever encountered. So kudos to the entire team for embracing this attitude. We're putting safety first, truly, right? And because there are a lot of other times where I have encountered safety, and it's like, yeah, safety's first. Every organization says safety first, right? That everyone says that. But yet we're going to cut the staffing. We're going to do this. All those kind of things are happening that are really counter to that message. Not here. I've not witnessed that here at all. So again, never have the doubt that your decision will be questioned, ever. So that, please take that to the bank and keep it. Always note that, and have that in your toolbox to be aware of. Now, how do we handle it if we do decide to do that? First of all, I would say the first thing is communicate early. Communicate early with the coordinators and the entire team and the passenger, right? Just as soon as you have an inkling that might be happening, communicate that and come up. Then we all collectively come up with alternative solutions. Framework it around safety, not inconvenience, right? That is the mission. Now, when it comes to passengers and how you're going to tell passengers, less is more. You do not need to explain yourself in depth. As a matter of fact, that sets you up for potential failure, if you will, or makes it more difficult. Simple thing: I'm not adequately rested to fly this flight safely. That's it, right? You don't need to say anything more. Just last month, we had a mechanical going from Honolulu to Guam. That's a long flight. Is airplane change, whatever, and we ended up having to cancel. 384 people were stranded. A quick PA, and folks, sorry, but we are not rested, and we can't perform our duties anymore. Something to that effect. It needs to be short. It needs to be decisive. That's what we're counting on all of us for. Remember, another organization, another pilot, another entity that is involved in this can help, but absolutely no one can undo an accident or an incident, especially if it's attributed to fatigue. So always remember that, right? And the hardest thing about safety is what I told earlier. The difficulty of selling something that hasn't happened yet, right? We get plenty of judgment when we do something wrong in the world in general, but certainly in safety. We don't get recognition when things go well because they're not even evident, right? If we made a decision to not fly, and that decision potentially avoided an incident or an accident, we will never know that. So there's no reinforcement. So that's the challenge of doing that kind of preventative safety style or safety management. So now the multi-legs, again, I talked about how there is the threat of multi-legs, and I gave the examples of how that can creep up, and especially that whole subtle factor of duty day. I want you to start thinking that way, that is that is a term that maybe some of you that haven't done it professionally, if you will, you haven't considered. Because when you are sitting at an FBO waiting for the individual for 4 or 5 hours, you are on duty. You're not resting. Just be aware of that. Okay. I'm not telling you that means you should cancel all that. I don't want to scare anybody that you should, oh, no, don't fly anything. No, it can work. Maybe you'll find a quiet room, but just be aware of it. Right. Maybe find something that allows you to rest. Maybe go somewhere else, sit on a bench, and on a nice clear day, and you can rest or meditate, whatever works for you. I'm almost done, I promise. Quick thing. So consider these strategies to preserve safety, especially late in the day. And again, don't rely on your judgment at that moment. You need to plan it ahead of time. So treat each leg as a new flight, as you get a new weather briefing, get a new fuel planning, a new pre-takeoff briefing, a new go-around briefing, a new stabilized approach briefing, all of it as if it's new jet, new day, as we say in my world. Starting over again, just everything is new. You have a new, fresh perspective. Don't treat fuel stress as a reason to stop. Treat it as a reason to not push, right? And also plan ahead. If you think you might need fuel somewhere in there, do it early, right? And even if it means carrying a bunch of fuel, which of course can be limiting for us with our single engine piston airplanes as to how many people we can carry. That's another thing to consider ahead of time. It's like, well, when will I need fuel? And can I really carry 2 people in their bags? Maybe I'll need to focus on a 1-person mission for these long trips, for those of us that don't have a turbine cabin class airplane or something like that to consider. Okay. To be done here. This is something that it took me a while to kind of formulate into words, and I was trying to figure out, how do I put this into words? But this is the best I could come up with. I want you to consider considering, that's redundant, but anyway, consider thinking it this way, that our mission is not transporting people. Our mission is safety, right? That our mission is not to take Janet from point A to point B because she's going through a very difficult time. Our mission is to provide a safety service. That is the service, if that makes sense. The transportation of the individuals is the byproduct, right? And therefore, it makes no difference if we're by ourselves or if we're with an individual. So if you focus on that, right? And I heard this phrase and I wrote it down. I can't remember where I found it, but in volunteer aviation, compassion motivates the mission, but discipline brings everyone home. And remember, the goal is to complete as many missions as possible. The goal is to make yourself available for future missions, so to perpetuity. That's the goal. It's a marathon, right? It's the long game. So it's a subtle subject, right? Again, it looks good on paper. I think just like we do threat and error management with all the technical aspects of a rejected takeoff, go-arounds, all those things we've talked about, this is a little bit more subtle because it's also individual, right? What is fatiguing for one person might not be for another. And that's okay. So we each have to have our own limitations. But I think if we create a certain set of boundaries and we start coming up against them, we bounce up against them, then we have something to keep us in check, right? Because that is the danger of any kind of volunteer work. There is no limit. In the Airline Pilots Association, we would call the folks we will call them Alpha widows. It's what happens to families and it's not a true death. It's the destruction of family and things that are because of so much volunteer time, because there's no one to tell you, hey, it's 5 o'clock, it's time to go home. You're not getting paid. And I'll finish with this. Don't forget, your body has no idea when you're flying if you're getting paid or not. It's just as fatiguing if you're getting paid a lot of money per hour or if you're completely offering your services voluntarily. So if the commercial operators are viewing this with multi-crews, by the way, and highly sophisticated equipment, are placing all these rules, maybe we should take note and implement something similar. So thanks for enduring this long conversation and this monologue, if you will. I very much would like to hear how you mitigate this threat. I'd like to hear from our our safety team, our team, as to how they would like to see cancellations happening and what their experience have been of things that worked well, things that didn't. And again, if you don't have the input right now, feel free to email me. You all have my email and phone information. I'm always available to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexi. Fascinating as always. David is going to he just did, dropped Alexi's email in the chat there. He's also will drop the volunteer services team if you need to speak to them. I do want to underscore and exclamation point what Alexi said. Safety is the most important thing here. Uh, Without that, we don't exist here. And so anytime you do need to cancel because you're tired, because you heard a little noise in your airplane that's not the same and it feels fine to you, but I don't know, cancel. We will figure it out. Let us know. Obviously, cancellations early in advance are the best, but those last minute ones as well, we will figure it out. We will make sure that the passenger is taken care of in one way or the other. So I promise you that you will never hear a disappointment uh, comment or even disappointment in the voice of a coordinator who you speak to when you cancel. We want everybody home safe. So that's pretty clear. I see we're going to drop some questions in. Uh, Piling onto the safety insurance side, what sort of study analysis has been done on AFW pilots' flight hours versus non-AFW pilots' safety to help make the case, for example, that it's safe to fly plus insurance discount? Oh, I see what you're saying. Um, I don't have an answer to that question, although I I think that answer is out there somewhere. I don't have it. Alexi, do you know it? The Angel Flight pilots versus general GA pilots?
I think that would, I don't know that there's data that is going to be giving a sufficient answer. I think there's such a large population of general aviation pilots that it's going to be pretty difficult to tabulate. Um, Again, my only source of coming with the duty rigs and the self-imposed limitations is just what I said. Is like if the commercial operators are using them, I think it's a good idea for us to do something similar. At Angel Fly West, I will say this: we and it's come up before about potentially doing some sort of oversight, if you will, and I think that we've all agreed that that's probably a dangerous path. We're relying on the FAA certification requirements. We're relying on the piloting command's requirements to be self-aware as to whether or not they're fit for duty and so forth and so on. I know that's not exactly the answer you were asking, but I think I mean, I'll look to see if there is such data. I'm not aware of, and I would be surprised if there is, because I don't know, besides AOPA, maybe, I don't know of any organization that has actually taken that to task.
Yeah, the only one that might have that is ACA and Air Care Alliance, and I'll look into that. But Garen, I'll check for you and find out if that info is out there. Ace, previous town hall recordings. Jess, do we have a link for that?
Yeah, I'll drop the YouTube playlist in the chat.
Any other questions for Alexi,
E-
for the
Even,
team?
even if they're not questions, if you have ways that you deal with fatigue and examples that you've had, maybe you've had an event when you say, you know what, I should have done that on this one, or yeah, by the end of the day, I was like, oh, super tired, or again, feel free to email me and don't be bashful if you think of it right now.
Craig Berger.
Thanks, Alexi. Thanks, Jerry. I was, first of all, true. Thanks for doing this. As I listened to you, I was thinking about the role of mission assistance. It's a little bit like a digital panel. It can be really helpful. For camp flights, it's great. Obviously, when you got an airplane full of campers, it's nice to have an extra set of hands and somebody to communicate with the passengers. I would say for the newer pilots, think about it, it's I've I'm lucky I have a couple buddies of mine who like to fly with me, and we trust each other, and we do a lot of IFR work together. So if you got sketchy weather, it's nice to have somebody else you can work with. But anyway, I think the role of mission assistant can help make a long day uh, certainly more manageable, particularly somebody you know and trust.
That's
Yep.
brilliant, Craig. Thank you. And I actually I had a note to mention that, so thank you for that. That's brilliant. That's absolutely right. And you said a very important thing at the end. You said someone you know and trust. That's super critical. There is a potential threat with folks. I've seen that happen where they divided duties with someone that didn't know. Be a little cautious with that, because that actually it can become more of a threat. But most of the time, I think mission assistants are people that we know. And you're absolutely right. That's priceless to have another set of eyeballs and another set of ears. And as you said, even if there are someone who are not pilots, just the fact that they can assist with passengers, that's brilliant. Thank you for that input.
Alan Markham.
I'll second the recommendation on mission assistant. If nothing else, it's just someone else to keep you company. And that alone, I found, can keep my mental acuity up. The other thing that I really like to make sure is when it's going to be a longer day, bring food and take a break on the ground. I set a minimum time of at least an hour. Make sure that I can decompress, use the
Welcome
restroom,
everybody to
definitely eat and have something to drink, because both of those, lacking either of those, can be really fatiguing. And the oxygen recommendation in the chat is superb. It's remarkable. Even if you're at 5,000 feet for a few hours, a quick breath of oxygen makes a huge difference.
Great input. Yes, food. And yeah, I brought a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with me on my last flight. And boy, did that make a difference. Yeah, there's nothing worse than hypoglycemia and all that. And the oxygen is also a great idea. Thanks for that. That's great input.
Yep. So I think we're referring to Lucas's comment about minimizing flights higher than 7,000 feet when possible to prevent fatigue from lack of oxygen. Thank you for that. Anybody else? Comments, questions, something that you have done?
This is Stan.
Hey, Stan.
Yeah, I can't limit my flights to 7,000 feet because my
No,
airport is at 6,100 feet. So
There
some
you
of
go.
us fly at high altitude all the time.
Yep, Bruce Robertson said same thing in Reno. We do have a fair amount of mountain ranges to deal with here at Angel Flight West, so that is true. But anybody else?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I found, I flew a lot of camp missions. I'm based in Santa Rosa, or was based in Santa Rosa when I was still flying. I flew a lot of camp missions out of Fresno, and I found that if going into Fresno a day ahead of time and spending the night in a hotel was one of the best ways to mitigate fatigue that I know of. You go in, you have a nice dinner, you sleep, you get up in the morning, you're rested. You can even stand the heat in Fresno. I highly recommend it.
I don't know
Absolutely.
about that stand the heat in Fresno
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
but
No, the hotel is a great idea. And again, it kind of touches a little bit on that decision of a sure loss if you want to view it that way. But I agree with you entirely. I think it's, yes, it makes the trip longer. It might make it a multi-day trip, but without a doubt, that's a brilliant recommendation.
good to see you, Jim, by the way.
Ace here.
Go ahead.
One thing that's been hard to acknowledge, but it's that what I could do 10 years ago, I can't do anymore without getting tired. Okay. So our patients here in Honolulu, I'm in Honolulu, so they usually want to come over in the morning and then go back late afternoon for their appointments. And they used to just go get them, bring them over, wait for them, and take them back. And now I find that wears me out. So I've had a lot of good luck offering them to, hey, if you want to come the day before, I'll bring you over. And especially the cancer patients, telling them that they can stay at Hope Lodge for free. So a lot of our passengers now do that as a routine. They'll come the day ahead, spend the night at Hope Lodge, and then go back the next day, and then I can take them each way because we don't have enough pilots to fill all the requests when they want to come the same day. And other people, they'll say, "Oh, I'd rather come on the airline in the morning and not spend the night." That's fine.
Great. Thank you, Ace. I think
Thank you.
it's probably something a lot of people don't want to admit, don't want to say can be a problem. So it's nice to hear somebody say that out loud.
Yeah,
Uh,
10-hour days used to be no problem. Now I find myself getting sleepy while I'm waiting for them to take them back.
Keith has some safety notes for us. Don't be afraid to spend the night. Don't mess with icing, and don't be the lead item on the evening news. Agree 100% with that one, Keith.
And
Uh,
this is Bruce. I wanted to also mention that, the duty time rules that Alexi was referring to uh, take into account sort of cumulative duty time, not just in a particular day, but also weekly, monthly, even longer than that. So consider, I guess one of the things you could consider is what have been my last couple of days like? Have I been if I'm fatigued in one day, should I expect to be waking up the next morning and feel fine? So consider your level of activity and your level of potential accumulated fatigue um, on any given day when you think about what you're going to do that particular day.
That's
thank
great.
you.
Thank you. Yes, cumulative is the word of the day, without a doubt. It's and fatigue is very sneaky in that manner, and it's and again for those of you that have done commercial operations, and I know a lot of you have. It's yes, not only is it addressed in the regulations, but it's also in all the fatigue management studies that are out there. It's the chronic fatigue, which is part of cumulative fatigue, versus the instantaneous fatigue, right? Which is it adds up. I see it when I come back from a long haul flight. It's and to your point, Ace, I used to do international flights in my 30s, and I could handle them much better than I can handle them now. So it's just how it is. And again, it doesn't matter how in shape you are or anything. It just doesn't matter. It's part of it. So absolutely, kudos to you for saying that out loud. That's I agree with you.
Ron says, great presentation. Good sleep the night before, especially for an early start. He says, thanks. And then Alan mentions that can, passengers can suffer from fatigue too, which is true. A lot of our passengers especially coming back from treatment, can be really tired. That can be tough. Jimmy had to leave. He says, great presentation. So thank you all for your questions, your comments. Anybody else? By the way, I do want to mention that for Bruce Polton, who's here, and Alexi, both the two of them, not only do they do these safety presentations for us and write the safety articles, but they spend a fair amount of time working with the volunteer services team on a bunch of related volunteer safety issues. So kudos to the two of them for the amount of time that they put into this organization, making sure that we're safe. And they've been doing this for quite a while now. So thank you guys. Appreciate it. Next meeting, I know we put it at the beginning. Just what's the date? April.
Yeah, I don't have off the top of my head now.
All right, it's all right. We'll put it out there, but it is Volunteer Appreciation Month. April is. It's a time to. We did it last year. I hope some of you were there and remember it. April 23rd. It was just a time to be appreciative for the volunteers in this organization. We'll have some passengers who are going to talk. Some of the staff will talk about appreciation, and volunteers can talk about their appreciation for the organization and flying for us. Keith, if you make a safety note on your mission report, it gets handed over to Alexi and Bruce. We're actually literally just last week talked about improving that process to make sure that those two guys get those comments. So if you did make a safety note and didn't hear back from us, please email David. Will you drop volunteer services in again now? Email this address it's going in right now, and we will follow up with it. Afraid some of those might have been falling through the cracks. Okay. We look forward to seeing you all April. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Great presentation,
Thanks, Bruce.
as usual. Okay.
Thanks, buddy.
All right. Have a good one. Thanks.
Bye.